Good evening, and welcome to another edition of Healthy Heart Nation's Heart to Heart Conversations, where the members of the Healthy Heart Nation team come together to talk about issues that affect the Black community. National Adoption Month is a campaign that seeks to increase national awareness of adoption issues and bring attention to the needs of adoptive families. Healthy Heart Nation has been touched directly by the adoption story. As we look at the statistics that represent the Black community and adoption, you will notice that, some basic information to be aware of is from a gender of adoption standpoint, 51% of males are adopted, while as 49% of females are adopted. And as it relates to the ethnicity of adopted children, white children are adopted 50% of the time, and for Blacks, it is half that number. It's roughly about 25%. As a result of these numbers, there are more Black children waiting in foster care than there are pre-screened Black families ready to adopt them. And according to Ira Schwartz of the University of Michigan, 53% of all children in the state of Michigan who entered the foster care system as newborns were still there at the age of 4. Tonight's story will feature two lovely ladies who I am very close to, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as well, and how that story was very different from them as a result of their families, and we'll call them adoptive families for this point and all point and purposes, but how their families brought them into loving and caring homes, and as a result, the outcomes for them was much different. I'd like to introduce my first panelist, and her name is Devonna Roseberry. She is attorney Devonna Roseberry, and she is the chair of the Healthy Heart Nation's Justice Team. And my second guest is Miss Sue McCormick. Mrs. Sue McCormick. She is also a member of the ambassador team of Healthy Heart Nation, and she is a business ambassador and a co-chair of the business group. Welcome, ladies.
Hello.
Hello. Good to be here.
Yes. And so for some of you who may not know, if everybody on the screen looks alike, well, there's a reason for that. Devonna and Sue are sisters, and they're also my sisters as well. So, there's a lot of love on this screen today. So what we're going to do is just kind of look at the story, and I guess this adoption story, where we were talking about families, and it started with two different families, right? Two a man and a woman over here, and a man and like almost a Brady Bunch kind of situation, right? And they're over living their lives in very similar and different ways, right? But at some point, they both understood and decided that they wanted to adopt some children. And so, if we look at these people, so Devonna and Sue, I want you guys to just tell me a little bit about what you're looking at here. And Devonna, we'll start with you.
Well, let's see. I'm looking at a picture of mom and dad.
Yes.
My dad and my mom, James and Eva Bryant, the parents who adopted me. They were not my biological parents, but they adopted me into the family as an infant, and they treated me like I was their biological daughter, gave me an absolutely wonderful, very blessed life. And I'm so grateful for them.
Absolutely. And Sue?
Yes, I'm looking at my parents, and as you said, we're going to call them adopted parents, but it's hard for me to say that because in my mind they are just my parents. But I'm looking at two people who could not successfully have children of their own, and decided to adopt, and what a blessing that was for me, because they adopted me and raised me. And as Devonna mentioned, my parents loved me so hard that I would forget for long periods of time that I was even adopted. So it wasn't until someone would say I look like my dad that, I would be reminded that we weren't biologically related. But yeah, my beautiful parents.
Right. Now, when I put this presentation together and I put these pictures side by side, like it really moved me how they look alike. So, the adopted families look alike. And, this was back in, the late 60s. And, I just see just these two beautiful couples, who loved each other and had enough love in their hearts to love someone else, right? To bring on children that they loved as their own, like absolutely no question about it. And so, the fact that that capacity exists in the world, is a really positive thing. And so, let's talk a little bit about your mother. So we'll stop talking about the adopted part. We'll talk about your mothers now.
Devonna, do you want to go first?
Sure. My mother, my mother told me that as it relates to my story, my adoption story, she told me that she had a pregnancy, and she'd given birth to a baby who unfortunately only lived for 8 hours. She always wanted to be a mother. She wanted to be a mother more than anything. And the doctors told her she would not be able to conceive.
Mhm.
And so she decided that she wanted to adopt. And so she talked to my dad, and that's what they did. So she sought out an agency so that they could start looking for a child, because she didn't think she could have children, and she wanted one, and so they chose me. She, I think, was definitely the driving force, and it was her idea, so to speak, to adopt a child, and just she's very strong, very loving, was a wonderful mother, attentive, gave me certainly everything that she could give me, everything I need and most of what I wanted, supported me to, no end, and continues to do that today. Sue?
Yeah, so I'm looking at Carol Ann. um, and, it's funny because when you describe your mom and her personality, my mom's personality was similar. But she had stillborn twins, and I don't know the details of her story because it was hard for her to share. But so I don't know if the doctor said she couldn't have children or if she just didn't want to try again after that, which is completely understandable.
Absolutely.
And so, like your mom, my mom was the driving force behind, I think she was the driving force behind adoption. And my parents, I don't know how much they really talked about it. But I think that once my mother saw me, she was, she was sure about what she wanted to do based on what she shared with me.
Can you tell that story of how she saw you?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So I was born in Cleveland, and my parents lived in Dayton, and my mother was a social worker in Dayton, Ohio. And that is where the Phil Donahue show actually started, in Dayton, Ohio. And he was having a show about adoption. And it was also focused on minority adoption and the importance of that. And so my mother was there. She happened to just be asked to come along to help take children from Dayton to the show as a social worker by the organization she worked for. And the way she tells the story, I was brought from an agency in Cleveland. And the way she tells the story is I was sitting on the stage and I had these big eyes and I had on this yellow and white dress and she could not stop looking at me. And my dad happened to be at home watching the show because he knew my mom would be there. And she said that, after the show, she went backstage, she asked about me, and she then went home and made my dad's favorite meal because she was going to talk to him about adoption and me in particular. And she said when they sat down to eat that he talked about the show and mentioned this little girl with big eyes and a yellow and white dress. So she said she knew that, it was meant to be.
It was meant to be. I mean, I love that story. I love when you tell that story. It's interesting because my mother, and I can't remember where she saw me when they saw me. I can't remember where I was. I was not on the TV show. So I can tell you I wasn't on the stage of a TV show, but she also says it was my eyes, my big eyes.
Really?
That caught her attention. Yeah. Says your big eyes. And then she said, you look like your dad.
What you do.
So yeah. So that is so funny that we have that in common. Like people would always tell me I look like my dad. As a matter of fact, one of my best friends, swore up and down when I told he and his wife that I was adopted. He swore up and down that my dad had an affair. He would not. He's like, I don't care what you say. Your dad had an affair and talked your mother into keeping the baby because you look so much like your dad.
Yes, and that is an untrue story, but yes, that is what.
Yes, my father did not.
Because and so that's also the case. And then they also say that because because we look so much alike as well, which is also something that people bring up. And so let's go back to that picture of your mom's again really fast, because I want people to know, because it's hard to see like who's who, right? You and Sue really almost kind of look alike. The foreheads are very prominent.
Okay, all right.
The eyes, and so that's Sue, that's your mom on the left hand side, and Devonna, that's your mom, our mom, on the right hand side. Okay. Yep. So you have these loving women, strong Black women with similar dispositions, similar fierceness in terms of their protection and love for their families. You grew up around that. You grew up seeing what Black love looked like in your home, and a community, and surrounded in all of those things. And for both your stories, it started with your mothers. And so I know that you two are very much crybabies, so prepare yourself, because let's talk about your dads now. Okay. So get yourself together.
Get yourself together.
And so that was the only picture I could find of your dad.
I love this picture.
Cut off a little bit.
I don't think I've seen that one.
Unfortunately,
it's so cute.
I love that picture. It's almost like, even though that was so long ago, I remember that I remember being in that bucket.
Hilarious. So, Sue, why don't you tell us a little bit about your dad?
Yeah, my dad was just a hardworking, middle class. He owned his own barbershop, and then he became a bailiff for a Black judge in Dayton. And he was just a hardworking man, and all he wanted to do was like go to work, go play tennis, come home to his family. And I'm not ashamed to say I was the apple of his eye. Absolutely. As you can see, I could talk him into doing anything, even
put you in a bucket. You
can talk him into the house in a bucket.
Put me in this bucket, Daddy.
And my
So
mom took the picture because she wanted proof that he would literally do anything I asked him to
Oh
do.
my gosh.
sweet, so
Oh,
sweet.
sweet. Oh my
All
gosh.
right. And so, Devonna, can you tell us a little bit about our dad?
Yeah, sure. Like, very similar to what Sue said. Hardworking man. Worked every day. Even later in life, when he became sick, he would not miss work, even though we'd beg him to not go. Um, as you can see in that picture, like Sue said, the apple of his eye. Sorry, La.
It's okay.
Um,
It's all right.
100% total daddy's girl. That was my buddy. Like, I love to, the one thing I think about all the time is we would take these trips.
Mhm.
We would get in the car, our station wagon, and
Mhm.
we drive to Maryland or wherever, we were going. And, you know, Danette and our brother Demetrius and mom, they would be like knocked out sleep. And I would be up with daddy. Like I was staying up with dad. And we would stop at the gas station and get little treats together. And, I kept him up. We talked. But yeah, he was a hardworking guy, very much a family man. Just like Sue said about her dad, he just wanted to work and come home and be with his family. He loved his wife, he loved his children.
And so, and I know even though we kind of have, unfortunately, like your dad's head is kind of cut off. I mean, again, they look very similar to me,
Yeah.
right? Like
Mhm.
they could be brothers or
They
they
could have
could be
been best
cousins.
of friends.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Exactly. You
Mhm.
know, and you can see the love in their faces and your faces in this picture. You can see the protection, that it was just like a part of, who they were as men. But like Devonna, in terms of, you met Sue's dad and you knew him, and Sue, you
Mhm.
knew Devonna's dad as well. Like, what things about them did you find were very similar?
I think I met your dad late in life, right? But their demeanor seems similar to me. Like
Mhm.
just their calm, you
Yeah.
know, I would watch the way that your dad, you and Devonna's dad, would just kind of be there looking at everyone. It was almost like he had a grin on
Observant.
his face. Just he was just
Mhm.
happy to
Yeah.
be there with his family and watching everyone move about. And my dad was the same way. So I just think their overall demeanor was similar.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with the demeanor. I think they were kind of, laid back, definitely, you know, fun and funny,
Yeah.
but just kind of laid back as well, just kind of watching things and, just like, let me tell you, Sue's dad loved him some Sue. I could tell that he was very, very proud of her. And he was very protective of her and he loved her. And I could say those things about our dad. So very similar.
All right, so we're going to move the conversation to Devonna and Sue, and your upbringings, in Ohio, and for you, Devonna, as well as in Georgia. Can you share a little bit about what your life was like growing up?
I would just a loving home. I had a little brother, a little sister, a mom and a dad. We lived in a, okay.
These pictures.
I know. I'm so glad you didn't tell us about this before. Um, but what I remember is dad worked. Mom did not until we moved to Atlanta. Mom didn't work, so she was a stay-at-home mom. She got us on the bus or took us to school, and she was there in the evening. With the proverbial snack and after school snack and all of that. As the oldest, I had chores and I was expected to kind of look after my brother and sister. And so, I had responsibility, but I had a lot of fun. I mean, when I think about my childhood, I just think of laughter. I think of
Right.
fun. I think of family. Um, I can't say that I had any worries or any care in the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When we moved to Atlanta, I was almost 12.
Mhm.
Um, and, pretty much the same thing. Just, a loving household. We spent a lot of time together. And it was just a good childhood, good life.
Yeah. And Sue?
Well, I was raised as an only child, so I always wished that I had brothers and sisters, but I had dogs instead. But same thing, I was raised middle class, two working parents. My mom was a social worker, my dad was a bailiff.
Okay.
Um, we lived in a all black suburb of Dayton. So, I was outside playing till the street light came on, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, but just loving parents. I thoroughly enjoyed my childhood. Like I said, for long periods of time, I would not, I found out I was adopted, I think, when I was I think I might have been 6 or 7. I know I was
That
in
was the question I
school.
wanted to ask you guys in terms of
Yeah.
like when did you know that you were adopted?
My mother had put together a baby book for me. And so I know I was in school because I was learning to read. And in the front of my baby book was the invitation to my baby shower. And it said, "We've adopted a baby." And I remember saying, "What does adopted mean?"
Hmm.
And so I was probably maybe 6 or 7 years old when I found out.
Okay, and for you, Devonna?
I must have been very young because it seems like I've always known. And I don't remember the conversation, but it just seems like they must have told me when I was so young that I just kind of grew up knowing it. Kind of like Sue said, it's not anything I would like just dwell on until I got kind of older. I kind of started having thoughts of, oh, I wonder about this, I wonder about that. But, you know, I was really young, had to be.
And so was the fact that you all were adopted, was that something that other people would bring up, or like in terms of your community and your group, was that something, and your families, is that something that was ever discussed?
Not in mine. I don't. I don't ever remember anybody bringing it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how
Yeah,
about you, Sue?
I had someone bring it up once, and it wasn't a good experience. But that was the only time that
Mhm.
it was ever brought up to me. So
Sue, did you beat the person up who said it?
no.
Okay, just checking.
Um,
It wasn't a good experience. I was like, okay.
the interesting thing, though, is the way that my mom described adoption to me, or the way she explained it to me, was that she said, "Do you know how like your friends, their mothers, carried them in their belly, and then went to the hospital and had them?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess." And she said, "Well, your dad and I actually chose you." Oh, she also said, your friends, their parents had them at the hospital and they brought them home and they had to keep them because that was the baby. And she said, "Well, we went out and we chose you."
Yeah.
And so I,
That's
I don't
beautiful.
remember all the details, but I do know that however she described it, I felt like a rock star, because I was like, I remember going to school and telling people I was adopted and getting the reaction like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." And I'm like, "Why? Your parents had to bring you home. Mine chose me."
No, absolutely. No, that's really, really important, in terms of how you accept the story, right? And just live your life with like pride,
Yeah.
in that moment. And so, for you, Devonna, did you kind of feel the same, or was there ever kind of any feelings of displacement?
I mean, I never felt about it. I feel like, mom would say something similar to what Sue was saying, like, we
Mhm.
chose you, you look just like your dad, your big eyes, blah, blah, blah. But I never felt like it was like a stain. You know what I mean? Like it was something to be ashamed of. I don't ever really remember feeling like that because I wasn't, and it's, I think because if you're not treated differently, you don't think about it. And so it's not like day to day you're sitting in your room like, oh, I'm adopted. It's
Right.
just something that for me really didn't, there was a time when I was like a teenager when I kind of started, and I don't know what sparked that, but I kind of started wondering, and then that passed. And then it wasn't until I became a mother and where that just kind of it came up again where I was kind of like, oh, I think I want more information.
Yeah.
So a question that that's out there sometimes is, in your opinion and based on your experiences, do you feel that it's better for the child to know that they were adopted, or to not know? And is there, well, let's start with that one.
I think children should absolutely know. I mean, I think
Mhm.
it's the parent's choice, whatever they feel is best for their child. But in my opinion, I think it's healthier for a person to know the truth of their story, um, at the age that the parent feels like it's appropriate. But I personally think that a child should know.
Yeah, I
Donna?
agree 100%. I think that you know, you don't want somebody in the family or otherwise, right? Coming up and telling your child something that is, it's an intimate thing, and it's something that I just don't feel like they should find out from anybody else. And that because when you adopt a child, unless you're just a little small family and you're living out in the country somewhere, you have a community, and so there's going to be somebody else who knows.
Yeah.
And so why risk it? I think it's definitely healthier for the child to know.
Yeah, because basically you've got two things that you're weighing in the balance in that instance, right? The trust of the
Mhm.
child,
Yes.
Mhm.
right? Or the potential feeling of abandonment.
Right.
So was there any time when both of you all felt abandoned at any point? I know you used it as a badge of honor. I was chosen, Sue, but were there ever any abandonment issues?
Yeah, I think, once I hit a certain age and I had a better understanding of, when I could comprehend past more than just the story that my mom gave me, right? At some
Mhm.
point you're like, well, wait a minute. So that means there's someone else involved in this story. There's at least two other people
Right.
actually involved in this story. And for me, I focused more on my biological mother. So I didn't harp on it. I do remember seeing TV shows where adopted children were on and felt a void and, just needed to know their biological parents. I did not grow up feeling that way, but I did have moments, and it was usually on my birthdays, not every birthday, but every now and then, where I would be thinking like, and Devonna has told me the similar thing where I've been
Mhm.
thinking like, I wonder if my biological mother like thinks of me on this day, or I wonder what her story was. Like I would wonder about that. I don't think it was so much abandonment as it was I just wanted to I had questions. I had questions. Yeah.
Okay, and Devonna?
I mean, I hate to sound like a broken record, but Sue and I are very much alike. I think our thought patterns are very similar. I do tell my husband all the time I have abandonment issues, though.
Yeah.
um, and so, just like Sue, I think once you get older and you do realize, like you said, there's another part to this. You do have questions, I think. I did. I had some questions like, well, wow, what happened there? Why couldn't, and like you said, you usually focus more on the biological mother. Why couldn't she keep me and raise me? Was she really young? Was she an adult and just didn't want me? So those kind of feelings I did have from time to time. Again, it wasn't always, but just thoughts. So
I also must say that I also thought that Diana Ross was my biological mother. So I was just like, she's too busy. She's too busy.
Listen, I just knew that Diana Ross.
I'll just wait.
I just knew that Diana Ross was my mother too.
The eyes.
She had eyes. She had big eyes, and I
Right.
mean, she could sing.
But I also thought Martin Luther King was my father.
I don't understand that one.
But then once I did the math,
it wasn't working.
Yeah.
I just knew Diana. She could sing. I mean, I fancied myself a singer at the time.
You have a lot of gifts, Ivana. I'm gonna just say you got gifts. The Lord, you're just a bit like for real.
That's not one of them.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I don't know if all her kids could sing either. So
right. It's just a generation or two. Oh yes, but
it's funny because when Sue and I met, and when we would talk, and and then I don't know who said that first, like you too, me too.
Right. Absolutely. So let's talk about when you met, or what was the catalyst to both of you all meeting. And we'll start with you, Devonna, on that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I was married with children. I remember going with my oldest son. I remember going to my OBGYN appointment, and you're going to confirm that you're pregnant, and you're filling out this questionnaire, and there are questions on there about your family history. I didn't know. That's when it hit me. I do not know my biological family medical history. And so I just remember taking that, to the back and talking to my doctor and saying, like, I have no idea I'm adopted, and, she's like, okay, that's fine. So I have my oldest son. And then my next pregnancy happens to be a twin pregnancy. So then my mind goes crazy. What if I'm a twin? What if I'm a twin and we were separated? Like, just crazy thoughts I just kind of started having. And so, still really didn't do anything about it. I would talk to my husband. He kind of, really wanted me to search. I didn't know how to search. I didn't even know what that really looked like.
Because we're talking about before there was an internet, right?
Absolutely. We're talking about the late 90s, probably right when you've got mail, like dial up. Yeah, it was the dial up. And so anyway, I'm at home one day with all my 3 babies, and I'm watching somebody, Geraldo, one of those shows. And they're talking about reunions and finding lost family. And so I just said, let me just dial the number and see. So I pick up the phone, I dial the number, and they tell me, well, where were you born? I said, Ohio. Well, we don't search in Ohio, but here's the name of someone who does. And I thought, okay. So I call that person. I'm like, I don't really know much. I know the name of the hospital. I think I knew the name of the hospital, and I knew the name that I had been given at birth. So anyway, I called this lady, and I kid you not, she was, are you about to say something?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but how did you know the name? How did you know the name that you were given at birth? Well, I didn't know that. I never knew that. Did you knew that before?
I'm a snooper, and so I snooped.
Did you have a birth certificate, or did you have paperwork?
Oh, I found my adoption papers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like I knew where Dad kept his important papers. And so I went snooping one day and found like my actual adoption papers, and I saw the name. Yeah.
But what was that like? Like, what feeling did you have when you came across it? Do you know what age you were?
I don't remember. I was very young.
young snooper.
I was pretty young. I mean, I was like a few months old.
You've been nosy for a long time. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, you're talking about what age was I when I snooped?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I thought you meant when I was adopted. I was probably a teenager.
Okay.
Yeah, we were definitely living in Atlanta at the time. But so
Okay.
anyway, I tell this lady the information and she says, I will probably be calling you back in a few days. And then I was scared. You're just like, what have I done? Like, well, wait a minute. Like, I thought this would take a long time. But it didn't. You know, she called me back and she had my biological mother's name. She had she told me a little bit of information about her. And she told me where she was currently living. So for me, I just kind of took that information and like put it on a shelf.
Now, before you move on with that, like, so in order for you to get that information, right? There's something that the person who gave you up for adoption has to fill out, or is that just available? Like there's closed files, there's open files. Like, how does that happen?
Okay, so we're talking about a couple different things. So my adoption was definitely a closed adoption. They weren't, I don't even think they were doing open adoptions back then. So it was closed. The woman who did the search, I don't know how she found out her information, like, but I did, I did also write to I can't remember the name of it, but in Cleveland, to the adoption agency, basically. And so, yes, I believe that she did have to indicate, the biological mother did indicate that it was okay to give, it was non-identifying information. So it did not give me her name, none of that. It just told me, it gave me a glimpse into the circumstances, what age she was, you know, how tall she was, her complexion, her hobbies. And that was basically it. And to be honest, that information probably meant more to me than even getting the name at that time, because I just, you know, but it was funny because like the hobbies that she had, like I couldn't connect with any of those. She's creative. I was like, I don't have a creative bone in my body, but
She
anyway,
wasn't a singer? No.
it wasn't Diana Ross. Clearly, it wasn't Diana. But yeah, that information meant a lot to me. And then the woman who did the search found the information. I held on to it. I just couldn't do anything with it for a lot of reasons. Fearful, you don't know what you're going to find. You know, kind of what does this mean? What is my family going to think about this? You know, and so I just kind of held on to it for probably a couple years.
Wow.
Yes, I'm thinking. Yeah, I think it was maybe a couple years.
And so, Sue, how was the process for you?
My process was a little different. So I, again, didn't grow up longing to search for biological people. But I went to see a movie, Antoine Fisher, with my children. My children knew I was adopted because I wanted them to, you know, I just wanted them to know. And I got really emotional in the movie. And I'm usually emotional in movies, but I was very emotional in one scene where I think it's the end of the movie and Antoine Fisher comes in and his whole biological family is there. And, you know, they've got like fried chicken and collard greens and like, you know, pies and stuff on the table. And they're there to welcome him. And I just like had a complete meltdown in the movie theater. And so afterwards, my children just said, they called a family meeting. And they said, we think you need to search for your biological, you know, relatives, because we want to know where we come from. Like we know on dad's side, but we don't really know anything about you biologically. And so I was like, you know, I'll think about it. And so I went to work the next day and there was internet. And I just Googled, I don't know if it was Google back then, but I just put in Cleveland adoption agencies because I wasn't sure I wanted to search. I didn't want to call my mom. I didn't want to, like Devonna said, I didn't want to upset anyone. So I just put the information in the internet, and a list of adoption agencies came up, and they were in alphabetical order. And so I called the first one, Applewood.
That was it. Yeah.
And I just said, "Hi, I'm an adoptee. I don't know the process. I'm thinking maybe possibly I might search, but can you walk me through the steps?" And so the woman walked me through. I'd have to write the state. I'd have to do this. I'd have to do like 3 steps just to find out the adoption agency. And then after that, like all these steps. And I was overwhelmed. I was like, okay, thank you. Thinking I'm not going to do this. And she says, well, I can't let you off the phone before asking for your information. Let me search our database, because if by some chance you were adopted through us, that would cut out like 3 of your steps. And I was like, okay. And she's like, we're small. It's a long shot, but let me just take your info. And I was on hold for maybe 5 minutes, and she comes back and she's like, are your parents, she named my parents. She named the street I grew up on. And I was sitting at my desk at work in tears. And so, but my my process was longer than Devonna's, because I did it along with a volunteer who works with adoptees. So my search took, I think, maybe almost a year. And I eventually got the name of my biological mother and my older biological sister, who was Devonna. I got that information on the same day, and then had to decide who to reach out to first. So that was.
And so who did you reach out to first?
The woman who helped me search suggested that I reach out to my biological mother first, because she said, your sister might not know she's adopted. So you really want to think through that. So let's reach out to your biological mother first.
And these searches are happening at the same time, around the same time, like as far as you and Devonna's search?
I started mine first, and I had been, so while Sue was searching, I had finally contacted our biological mother and had started having some conversations with her, getting to know her, getting to know, what she was like, who she was, how she grew up, and those kinds of things. Yeah.
Okay. And so this was roughly what year? For your start?
I want to say it was 2000. Well, I don't know when you were talking to her, but I came along. Yeah. I found her in, I think it was 2004, maybe.
That sounds right.
And so when you found her, Sue, she had already been in touch with Devonna.
Yes.
Which lets you know that Devonna already knew, so then you could reach out to her.
Yes. She actually put me in touch with Devonna.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so tell me a little about that. What was that like? Your first initial meeting of each other?
Well, I'll just say this, that in that year and a half, however long it was that I was talking to our biological mother, I knew that she had 2 other kids that she had raised, but she did not tell me about Sue. I think that she was just, maybe didn't know how it would make me feel about her to know that, 2 years later, that she had another child, because my non-identifying information obviously didn't mention Sue, because Sue hadn't been born yet. And so I didn't know about Sue. But I did get a phone call from our biological mother one day, and she very quickly on the phone told me that, hey, here's what happened 2 years after you, blah, blah, blah. And you have a sister and she found me and she wants your number. I mean, it came out just like that.
Well, that's probably partly because I was like chomping at the bit to call you. So
yeah. And so I was out of town with my whole family, visiting other family. And I get this call and I literally remember being outside, like putting the kids in the car to go somewhere and getting this call. And I just kind of remember being like, are you serious? Like, you didn't tell me this, But, I told her, yeah, give her my number. And I think Sue probably called me immediately. Like, it seemed like I was still at the car, putting kids in the car. I have a lot of kids, but I was still putting kids in the car seats when Sue called. And it was just crazy to hear her voice. It sounded like my voice. And it was just, for me, it was very weird. It was just like I felt connected over the phone. And, we talked and I just kind of, I don't know, it was weird. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, here we go.
So it's not to the point, for you, it was a bit of a surprise?
Mm-hmm.
Or, okay.
It was a surprise. I didn't know.
Because you knew that there was a life, but you didn't know the extent of the life. And because she didn't mention it, that's
right. And she had
part.
mentioned, we had talked about
everything else. Yeah.
What I thought was everything. And she, I just didn't know about Sue. So yeah, I was shocked.
Yeah. And Sue, you were happy.
Yeah, well, because I had known, my non-identifying information that I got, probably a week after talking to the woman on the phone, said, your biological mother had a little girl or a baby girl, 2 years before she had you. So I had known about Devonna for almost a year. And as someone who was raised as an only child, you can imagine how excited I was to know that I had a biological sibling out there somewhere. So yes, when I spoke to our biological mother the first time, I said, and I know about, I used Devonna's name that she had been named at birth, because that's the name I had. And I said, I'm going to call her next. And she's like, whoa.
Hold up.
I'm in touch with her. So let me call her and then you can call her. And I was like, all right, call me back.
Yes. And I think I have a slide to kind of show a little something about the bond and the fact that, the families just really kind of just pulled in together. And so the picture on the left, and so for some of you who may not know, or if you're just joining, Devonna is my sister and Sue is my sister as well, because, once they found each other, my mom, in her own way, just, she adopted Sue, right? So she's like, you're my child too. And that statement, did that happen after your mom passed or before your mom passed away, Sue?
When I met your mom, we kind of had an immediate bond too. Like, I felt so comfortable with her. Your dad too. I mean, they're just loving people and accepting people. And I wasn't sure how your mom was going to react to me at first. But she was just, just like an auntie at first, right? And then when my mom passed so unexpectedly, not really even a year, I think.
I was about to say,
meeting you guys, she definitely just kind of naturally took on that role. I think she just told me, like, you're my baby.
She doesn't ask a lot of things. She tells, that's about right. And so that picture on the end with you in the pink and me in the middle and you, that was when I first met you.
That was
the photo.
Was that the first meeting?
Yeah.
Yes. And so, and so that picture. And so we also have a picture, and I guess I put it in there twice, of our brother Demetrius in the picture, as well as a picture of Parrish. And then we have the picture of mom and LaDonna, who is our sister-in-law as well. So Devonna, when you look at this picture, what are you seeing? What do you see?
I don't know. I'm like getting teary eyed. I just see my family. I see the people that I love. Um, Sue and I have such a special story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's made even more special by the fact that our families, and when I say like our family as well as Sue's family,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we have all just come together in love. Sue's cousins are my cousins, and my cousins
Right.
are Sue's cousins, and
Right.
we share holidays, and it's beautiful. I'm so grateful. It could have turned out in such a different way.
Yeah.
But I just see family. I see love. Yeah.
And how about you, Sue?
Yeah, I'm getting emotional. I think that, sometimes I sit and I think, but these pictures are actually bringing it home for me, is that what are the chances that not only Devonna and I connect and have, an authentic, like, just bond,
Mm-hmm.
but what are the chances that her sister and brother would be so accepting of me and this? And, like, that is not an easy thing. And our parents accepted, my parents accepted Devonna, Devonna's parents accepted me, like you said, cousins accepting.
Yeah.
Like, what are the chances that something like this could just happen so organically and be just so beautiful and harmonious? Really, I mean, there are a lot of people involved in this story.
A lot of people.
Yeah.
But
So,
it is.
And that's
I
a
would
whole
say.
nother. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that,
Mhm.
Sue and I had that first conversation, and
Mhm.
um, she ended up moving to Atlanta. That happened very, very soon, it seems like, at least, after our first conversation. And I quickly knew, like, she would be my friend. Like, if we weren't sisters, like, just from talking to her on the phone, I was like I told Keith, because my kids didn't know I was adopted. I just had never told them. And I remember telling Keith, like, I'm gonna have to tell these kids, because, like, she's gonna be in my life. Like, it was just so, like you said, it was so organic. The bond, it was so natural, and it was just gonna happen. So I think that's why this works.
yeah, I think that, we also have to give props to not only Danette, but Demetrius, and, like, you have to share your sister with another sister, after all these years. And that, I mean, that's not easy. That's some adjustment. You have to adjust to that. So I also just want to thank you too for sharing.
Yes, Danette, you've come a long way.
Yeah,
I'm looking for the picture.
that first picture,
She's all in between us.
leaning away from me.
She's in between us. Because we joke about that. Like, we joke about that the pictures, when initially, Danette was kind of like this with Sue, and then, like, the next visit, she's kind of like this, and then it's all,
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that first picture, she just kind of was like in between us, like
Feeling me out. Yeah. Feeling me out.
Yes, and the story, is a beautiful story in terms of the relationship that you all have, and just the bond and that it's come out of it, the family, right? The family. It is a family, right? And so, if we're talking to people out there who have some reservations about adopting, like, what would you want to say to those people?
I I think that sometimes people have reservations because they have reservations for different reasons, but sometimes it's, oh, well, I know the child will eventually, want to know their biological family, or they, I'm going to raise them, and then, they're going to want to know their biological mother. And I think that I like to share our story because it shows the good side of what happened. Yeah, every child should know their story if they want to. They should know as much of their story as they want to know. But there's beauty on the other side of that. Is it always great? No. But, in our case, we can share the other side of that, and there's enough love for everybody.
Absolutely.
And Devonna, what would you want to say to someone who's really contemplating adoption?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the same thing. I think, well, not I think, there are so many children who need homes, so many Black children who need homes, good, loving homes. I happen to work as an attorney in the child welfare system, and so I see it daily. There's the majority of children in foster care are African American. However, we don't have enough Black homes, right? We don't have enough Black people willing to adopt.
Yeah.
Black people willing to foster. And so I would say that there's beauty in it. There is, I mean, just being in a child's life and bringing unconditional love to a child who, our story was, we were adopted pretty young, right? We were babies. And so there's so many children who have suffered trauma, who have gone through things, and just, they're in bad situations. You know what I mean? And so I would encourage anybody who is thinking about adopting. I like to say, if you can't adopt, foster.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't foster, mentor.
Yeah.
Like, there is a place for you in a child's life, a vulnerable child, who needs somebody, needs love, needs support.
Mm-hmm.
There's a place for you, and not everyone's cut out to adopt.
Right.
It does take special people to adopt a child. But there's a way for you to be involved in a child's life and make a difference in that child's life.
Absolutely.
That's beautiful. And with that, I think we'll just go ahead and close out the show, but I don't want to close it without letting people know about the podcast that you all are doing. When will that be available to share? Because we have only scratched 2% of your story.
I know. There's no way. Right. There's no way we could get into the entire story.
No, we would need a Roots type mini series.
Yeah. It would need to be a
lifetime series.
Yeah, that's what we always say. A lifetime, multi-part.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So yes, our podcast is called Collective Thought. And in our podcast, we will be sharing bits of our story. Because again, we can't just, it's not a podcast about just us and what, our adoption story. So we will be sharing our story within our podcast on each episode. We kind of have to do it that way because it's so detailed, has so many parts, so many layers, and it continues to evolve. We'll say that.
Yes, it does.
The never-ending story.
The never-ending story.
Right.
Well, thank you, ladies, for your transparency and for sharing this story during Adoption Month, which is again November. It's really important, like Devonna said, to pour into the underserved community, the Black community, which is what Healthy Heart Nation is all about. There are more than one way for you to do that, but we invite everyone who is on right now to just consider Healthy Heart Nation for your Giving Tuesday campaigns, which will be on November 29th. The organization is raising money for the pressure project that we're doing which is going to be to get blood pressure measurements in all the Black barbershops throughout the US. And so we're raising money so that we can purchase the machines, that we can also educate the barbers on how to do it, and also to do continual education of the community. Last year, we raised $10,000 to give to 4 students who are attending HBCUs. And so we awarded those scholarships. Each of those 4 people received $2,500. And we are also working to get information like this out and share and mentor and pour into the community with people who are committed and dedicated to making sure that we strengthen the bond that is our community. And it starts with family. And whether you're blood related or not, we are all family. And so we have to support the community as such. So thank you for joining. I ask that you like, share, go to our YouTube channel, which is the Healthy Heart Nation, and like and subscribe. We do our programming every 3rd Friday of each month. And so our next Friday, which will be, I think it's December 16th, right before Christmas, we'll be doing a show about COVID and how it's affecting our community. So it'll be led out by our health ambassador chair, Michelle Burrows. So again, thank you for joining us tonight and have a blessed day.